It was her first week. A new teacher, a new school, a new classroom that still smelled like freshly laminated posters and dry erase markers. Students barely glanced at her when she walked in. Some smirked, others whispered. But she stood tall, braids freshly done, dressed sharp, calm, and collected. She had waited a long time for this opportunity, not just to teach, but to show them that respect and discipline could live beside kindness. Her name was Ms. Avery. She had a quiet strength about her. Not loud, not flashy, just steady. She wasn't there to make friends with the kids. She was there to lead them, to earn their attention, not beg for it. But not everyone liked that. It started with small things. Chairs scooting a little too loud. Books dropped on purpose. Phones slipped under desks. Nothing huge. Nothing she couldn't handle. At least, that's what she thought. The problem wasn't just about rules. It was about her. Some of the kids didn't say it out loud, but she could feel it. The looks. The way they laughed when she turned her back. It was the way they stared at her braids. Like they were something foreign. Strange. A joke. One girl whispered to another and mimicked swinging hair back and forth. A boy in the back chuckled and said, "Bet those things touch the floor when she bows." She heard them. She just didn't react. That's what they didn't expect. No yelling. No threats. She simply continued teaching like their words had bounced off a wall. But sometimes silence makes people bolder. And bold turns dangerous when no one draws a line. On Friday, everything changed. The room was buzzing with low chatter. It was the last period of the day. Kids were restless. The energy felt thick. Ms. Avery had just finished writing on the board when she felt it. Quick movement behind her. Before she could turn around, she heard it. Snip. A sound that didn't belong in a classroom. Not a pen click. Not a chair squeak. Something sharper. Then laughter. Nervous. Scattered. But laughter. She froze. Her eyes scanned the floor. And there it was. A braid. Thick. Dark. Beautiful. Now limp on the floor like something discarded. She didn't move for a second. No one did. Then the boy who had made fun of her hair earlier stepped back, scissors still in hand, trying to hide them behind his leg. The room went still. The kind of still that makes your skin feel too tight. That makes your heart beat louder than the noise. She bent down slowly and picked up the braid. Not with a rush. Not with shaking hands. Just steady, calm, almost gentle. When she stood back up, her face wasn't red. There were no tears. But something had changed. The room felt it. The students weren't sure what would come next. Would she yell? Would she call security? Would she walk out? She did none of those. Instead, she stepped toward the boy, 2 small, measured steps. "You thought this was funny?" she asked, voice even. He didn't answer. She nodded slightly. "Do you know what these braids mean? Or did you just think they were decorations?" Again, silence. She held up the cut braid, her tone calm. "These braids are older than the school. They're older than your attitude. They are rooted in strength, survival, and pride. You don't get to cut that off." The boy fidgeted. Others looked down. But then she did something no one expected. She shifted her weight, slightly, deliberately, feet planted, right heel turned just a touch. Then, quick as lightning, her leg lifted in a clean arc. Asterisk, not a wild swing. Not a reckless move. Asterisk. A controlled kick. Precise. It stopped inches from the boy's desk, snapping the air. Just enough to make the chair skid back and the boy yelp in shock. The class gasped, but she hadn't touched him. She didn't need to. She stood there, arms at her sides, eyes steady. "You don't get to cross that line," she said softly. Not loud, not angry, just clear. And for the first time that week, the class was silent, for the right reason. He didn't speak. No one did. The sound of that control kick had said more than any punishment could. His chair sat crooked, his face pale, hands gripped the sides. And yet, Ms. Avery hadn't touched him, not even a brush. What shook them wasn't violence. It was precision, discipline, power without rage. Ms. Avery walked back to the front of the class like nothing had happened. She picked up her marker and continued writing the lesson on the board. Not a single word about what just occurred. Not yet. She knew better than to waste her breath when silence did the work. But inside, her heart wasn't calm. She had felt that boy's intentions the moment he stood behind her. She'd seen it coming all week. Each smirk, each snide comment, each look at her hair like it was a costume. The truth is, they didn't see her as someone who belonged. Not as a teacher. Not as a woman. Not as a black woman. They didn't know what those braids cost her. Each one was done by hand the night before her first day. 5 hours of pain and patience. Each strand told a story, a map of where she came from. Her mother braided her hair in the same way when she had her first school job, told her to walk in strong. Your hair carries your history. Don't let them take that from you. And now a piece of that history lay in her hand. That was the part the boy didn't understand. That cutting a braid wasn't just some prank. It wasn't rebellion. It was a cultural wound. But she wasn't going to let the story end there. When the bell rang, nobody moved. The energy was tight. Students glanced at her, unsure whether to leave. Some waited to see if she would explode, send someone to the office, call a parent. Instead, she turned, looked at them, and spoke with the same calm voice. If any of you believe what happened today was funny, I encourage you to do some reading this weekend. Start with the word dignity. Then move on to respect. After that, try heritage. You might learn something. And with that, she erased the board. She picked up her bag, tucking the cut braid inside, not out of shame but preservation, like saving a page torn from a precious book. As she walked out, something strange happened. No one laughed. No one joked. A few students moved to open the door for her. She didn't need the help, but she nodded with a quiet thanks. Word spread fast. By the time Ms. Avery got to the teacher's lounge, 2 staff members were already whispering. They paused when she entered. "Hey, we, heard something happen," one of them said. She nodded once, placed her bag on the table, and began unpacking her lunch like it was any other day. "You okay?" The other asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "I'm fine," she replied. "He's not hurt, but he learned something." The staff exchanged glances. Later that afternoon, the principal asked to see her. Ms. Avery walked into the office with her shoulders straight, holding nothing but her clipboard. The principal, a middle-aged man with a buzz cut and a permanent look of being 3 seconds behind, gestured for her to sit. "We've gotten a few, mentions about an incident in your class." "Yes," she said. "And, there was something about physical movement?" "No contact," she said clearly. "Just a demonstration of boundary." He cleared his throat. "Well, some parents may be concerned if students feel intimidated." She leaned in slightly. "If your concern is that a teacher defended herself from an attack on her person and her culture, then yes. That happened, and I didn't yell. I didn't call anyone names. I didn't make threats. I showed control." The principal blinked. "I don't tolerate disrespect. Not from students. Not from parents. I was brought here to teach, and that's what I intend to do." He leaned back slowly. "Understood." She stood up, gave a small nod, and left. Outside, the hallway had a different feel. Not fear, not tension. Something closer to reverence. The students who once looked through her now looked at her, not because of the kick, but because they finally saw the line she was drawing, one they wouldn't forget. The next morning, the classroom felt different. No whispering, no chuckles, no secret glances passed from desk to desk. The students sat a little straighter, pencils ready, eyes forward. You could feel it. Something had shifted. It wasn't fear. It was respect. Earned the hard way, but real. Ms. Avery stepped into the room quietly. She didn't need to slam a door or call for attention. Her presence did the work for her. She placed her bag on the desk, picked up a folder, and looked out across the room. "Good morning," she said simply. A quiet but unified good morning came back. Clear, focused. She nodded, pleased. "Let's begin." The lesson moved smoothly. Students took notes. They asked questions. Even the ones who used to slump in their seats now sat up, trying to catch every word. It wasn't just a memory of yesterday's kick. It was something deeper. They were seeing her differently now. About halfway through the lesson, a hand went up. It was from Jalen, the boy who sat in the back and rarely spoke. "Yes, Jalen," she asked. He paused, eyes flicking around nervously. "I just wanted to say I didn't laugh yesterday. I wanted to, but I didn't." The room tensed for a second. Ms. Avery nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, but let's focus on what we do next, not what we didn't do." Jalen nodded, quietly returning to his notebook. She could see it now. Some students had been shaken, others had been changed, and a few were still deciding which path to take. That was fine with her. Change didn't have to be instant. It just had to be real. As the lesson continued, she made a point to use examples from African history. She referenced stories of resilience, identity, legacy, woven into material in a way that felt natural but meaningful. When she spoke about strength, she didn't mean just physical. She meant the strength to be different, to stay calm when pushed, to stand tall in a place that didn't always want you there. At the end of the period, she asked each student to write something down before they left. One sentence, she said, passing around index cards. "Tell me what you think respect looks like. Not sounds like. Looks like." They wrote, some quickly, some slow and unsure. But they all did it. As they filed out, one of the girls, Alyssa, paused by Ms. Avery's desk. She looked nervous, her fingers tapping the edge of her card. "Ms. Avery," she said softly, "I just want to say I like your hair." Ms. Avery smiled gently. "Thank you. And I'm sorry about what they did. I didn't stop it. I should have said something." "That's okay," Ms. Avery replied. "You're saying something now." Alyssa gave a small nod and hurried out. After class, Ms. Avery gathered the cards and read through them at her desk. Some were vague. Some were surprisingly honest. Respect looks like listening even when you don't understand. Respect looks like not touching people without permission. Respect looks like Ms. Avery not losing her cool when they messed up. That last one made her pause. Not if they messed up. When it was honest, brutally so, but it meant the message had landed. Later, as she walked the hallway toward the staff lounge, she passed the boy from the incident, the one who had cut her braid. He didn't run, didn't speak, but his eyes found hers. And for the first time, he didn't smirk. He looked human, small, maybe ashamed, maybe not, but not proud. That was enough for now. In the lounge, she poured herself a cup of tea. One of the science teachers looked up from her laptop and gave her a nod. "Heard about what happened. Rough week, huh?" Ms. Avery took a sip. "It had its moments." "You handled it better than I would have." Ms. Avery smiled faintly. "I didn't come here to fight, but I won't let myself be walked over either." The teacher raised her cup in a quiet toast. "Well said." She spent the rest of the day teaching, correcting, encouraging. The braid in her desk drawer sat untouched, but never forgotten. It wasn't just a reminder of the insult. It was a symbol of the stand she took. And now the students were watching, more closely than ever. By Monday, the story had moved beyond her classroom. She hadn't shared it herself. But somehow, the news had made its way into other halls, other classes. Teachers were whispering about the new lady who roundhouse kicked air and still shook a room. Students in other grades were asking who she was, what really happened, and whether it was true she didn't even flinch. Ms. Avery wasn't surprised. Schools were like small towns. Word traveled fast. Even faster when the story involved a teacher standing up in a way no one expected. But she didn't entertain the gossip. She stayed focused, taught her lessons, greeted her students with the same calm tone. She didn't act like a hero. She acted like an educator, because that's what she was. Still, change was unfolding. That morning, her classroom door was knocked on 3 times before first period even started. The first was from a student she didn't teach, a 9th grader named Lila. Thin braids, quiet eyes, notebook pressed tightly to her chest. I just want to say I really like your class," Lila said, her voice barely above a whisper. You've never been in my class, Ms. Avery replied with a curious smile. I know, but I heard what happened, and I think it's cool that you didn't yell. Or hit him. I don't know. Just thank you. She nodded once. Thank you, Lila. You can come sit in if you ever want to. The girl beamed and disappeared down the hall. The second knock came from a staff member, Mr. Bryce, the history teacher down the hall. His arms were crossed awkwardly, like he didn't know how to start. I just wanted to say, you handled that thing last week better than I think any of us would have, he said. Kids like that, they push to see what sticks. You didn't let them stick anything. She gave a polite nod, but didn't linger on praise. I just did what I thought was right. He hesitated, then added, if you ever want backup on those rough days, let me know. The third knock came from someone she hadn't expected. The boy's mother, the one who had cut her braid. She wasn't escorted by security or brought in by school staff. She came alone, stood at the door after class, and asked softly, Are you Miss Avery? Yes, she said, guarded but calm. I'd like to speak to you, just for a moment. Ms. Avery gestured for her to enter. The classroom was empty now. Quiet again. The woman stepped inside, holding a small paper bag in both hands. I won't take much of your time, she began. I wanted to say I'm sorry for what my son did. I didn't raise him to act like that. I'm embarrassed. I'm angry. And I'm ashamed. Ms. Avery said nothing. The woman held out the bag. It's just a small gift. I braided hair for over 20 years before I started working in logistics. I know how much time and patience go into it. And I know how it feels when someone disrespects it. Inside the bag was a set of beaded hair ties, a jar of conditioning cream, and a folded note. I can't make him learn everything overnight, she said, but I can make sure he hears it from me. Ms. Avery nodded slowly, accepting the bag with steady hands. Thank you. The woman looked relieved. He's suspended, of course, but I told him he'll be writing an apology, a real one, handwritten, and he's going to read it in front of your class, if you'll allow it. Ms. Avery thought for a moment, then said, Only if he means it. Not for me, for the class. They were all affected. I understand, the mother said. You have every right. After she left, Ms. Avery sat quietly at her desk for a long time. She wasn't a stranger to apologies, but this one felt earned, not forced, not scripted, just human. She placed the bag in her drawer, beside the braid. Two symbols now, not just of pain but of restoration. Change wasn't about dramatic moments. It was about what people chose to do after. The apology came 2 days later. She didn't ask for it. She didn't schedule it. But when the boy stood at the door of her classroom with a paper in his hand and his mother beside him, Miss Avery knew it was time. The students were already seated. The room had that strange kind of energy, anticipation, without noise. They'd heard the rumors. They'd seen the shift in the school's tone. And now they were about to witness something they never expected. Ms. Avery nodded to the mother, then stepped aside. The boy walked slowly to the front of the room. His shoulders were stiff. He didn't look up. He didn't speak until he reached the whiteboard. Then he turned, hand shaking just enough to notice. I wrote this myself, he said, barely above a whisper. No one made me say it. My mom helped me spell check it, but these are my words. The room was silent. Every eye on him. Every breath held. He took a shaky inhale and read. I'm sorry for what I did. I thought I was being funny, but it wasn't funny. I didn't understand what your braids meant to you, and I didn't care how it would make you feel. That was wrong. I disrespected your culture, your body, your job, and your trust. I embarrassed myself, and I made other people feel unsafe. I was trying to look cool to my friends, but all I did was prove I don't know what respect means. I'm learning now. He paused, swallowing hard. I don't expect forgiveness right away, but I'm going to earn it. I'll listen more. I'll speak less. And I'll remember that being strong doesn't mean hurting people. Thank you for not yelling. Thank you for still teaching us. He folded the paper and looked down at the floor. Ms. Avery didn't clap. She didn't offer any dramatic gesture. Instead, she nodded once and said, Thank you for your words. The class sat still. Some students looked surprised. Others looked uncomfortable. But more than anything, most looked reflective. Ms. Avery turned to the class. What he just did takes something most people never practice: accountability. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to own your choices. She looked at the boy. You can return to class next week. For now, focus on listening. Listening is where respect begins. He gave a slight nod and walked out with his mother. The lesson that followed wasn't about math or grammar. It was about trust. Ms. Avery asked each student to write about a time they made a mistake and how they fixed it, or how they wished they had. Some hesitated. Some scribbled like the thoughts had been waiting to be let out. One student wrote about teasing their little sister. Another admitted to stealing candy from a store once and still feeling guilty. A third quietly handed over a blank paper but whispered, "Can I talk to you about after school?" That was the moment she knew the class had begun to change. Not because they were suddenly perfect students, but because they were opening up. The walls were cracking, and something real was coming through. During lunch, the principal stopped by again. This time, no warning, just a knock and a raised eyebrow. "I heard what happened today. Seems like your class is learning more than what's in the curriculum. They're starting to," Ms. Avery said. "I wanted you to know some parents are calling in, not to complain, to say thank you." She blinked. Really, apparently, their kids are coming home asking questions about culture, about respect, about hair, about boundaries. He gave a small smile. Not bad for week 2. She chuckled under her breath. It's a start. That evening, as she packed up her things, she took out the braid again. It wasn't as painful to look at now. It wasn't just a reminder of what had been taken. It was proof of what had been rebuilt. She tied a small ribbon around it, not to hide the damage, but to mark it, like a scar turned into something symbolic. That braid didn't belong on her head anymore, but it had earned a place in her story. The ribbon braid sat on her desk the next morning, not tucked away in a drawer this time, out in the open, not as a trophy, but as a symbol, a quiet presence, a reminder of everything that had unfolded. Some students noticed it right away when they walked in. Their eyes paused on it longer than before, but no one said a word. They understood now. The air in the classroom had changed. It wasn't tense anymore. It was focused, clear. The students weren't just showing up to learn. They were beginning to show up as people who wanted to understand, to do better. And Ms. Avery, she was still herself, still calm, still disciplined, but a little lighter in the way she moved. There was a subtle sense of peace in her shoulders, because when a storm passes and the walls still stand, you realize what you're made of. As the first bell rang, a student near the front raised his hand. "Are we allowed to talk about what happened last week?" Ms. Avery looked up from her folder. "You can ask. Just be respectful." The boy nodded. "I just wanted to say, I think what you did was brave. Not just the karate part, but the part where you didn't lose it. That probably would have made me explode." A few students nodded quietly. Ms. Avery took a deep breath. It's not always easy to stay calm, but calm doesn't mean weak. It means being in control of yourself even when others aren't. Another student, a girl from the far side of the room, added, "My mom said when you don't react, it makes people think harder." Ms. Avery smiled gently. "Your mom's wise." She paused and added, "The truth is, I wasn't calm because I felt fine. I was calm because I knew what I stood for. If I had screamed or fought back without thinking, the message would have been lost. But if I held my ground without losing myself, people would hear me, even in silence." For a moment, no one spoke. Then another hand went up. "What do your braids mean to you?" asked Jalen, the quiet boy in the back. That question landed heavier than the others. She leaned forward slightly. "They mean everything. My braids are my family's history, my culture's pride, my choice to show up in my truth, even in spaces that aren't used to it." She paused. When someone cuts them without permission, it's not just hair. It's a message, and not a kind one. The students listened carefully. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about understanding a world bigger than their own. a world of stories they had never lived, but now had a chance to hear. Later that day, during lunch, Miss Avery found a folded note on her desk. It was unsigned. Inside it read, "I used to think I didn't need to understand things that weren't about me, but now I realize that's a problem. Thank you for teaching something real." She folded the paper slowly and placed it next to the braid. Real learning wasn't about textbooks. It was about shifting someone's view of the world. And that was happening. Right here, one quiet moment at a time. That afternoon, the school counselor invited Ms. Avery to lead a workshop for other students about identity and cultural respect. At first, she hesitated. It wasn't her job to fix the whole school. But then she thought about Lila, about Jalen, about the apology, about the silence that followed her words, and the voices that started to speak afterward. She said yes. The workshop wasn't formal. No projector. No fancy speech. Just her, a few desks in a circle, and students from every grade. Black, white, brown, loud, shy, angry, unsure. She didn't need to perform. She just needed to be honest. They asked questions. Real ones. Why do people make fun of things they don't understand? How do you not let it break you? What do you do if it already did? Ms. Avery didn't pretend to have every answer, but she answered what she could, and that mattered more. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you could do isn't to fight back louder. It's to speak truth calmly, consistently, until the room leans in. And now they were leaning in. It wasn't just students showing up to listen now. Teachers started stopping by our classroom during their prep periods just to sit in and observe. Some would stand in the back, leaning against the wall, quietly watching as Ms. Avery led a discussion or broke down a lesson. They didn't interrupt. They just watched, and they left different. One of them, Mr. Keller, the PE coach, caught her in the hallway between classes. "I never really thought much about what hairstyles meant," he admitted, adjusting his clipboard. "I figured hair's hair, you know? You come in, do your job, that's it. But that workshop changed how I think, made me realize how much I've overlooked." Ms. Avery smiled softly. "It's not about guilt. It's about awareness." He nodded. "Exactly. Awareness. That's the word." That was a shift happening all around her now. Awareness was growing, in small ways, quiet ones, a shift in eye contact, a change in how questions were asked, a pause before making a joke. Even the principal began checking in more regularly, but not to monitor, just to understand. He'd ask, "How's the class dynamic?" Or, "Anything you need support with?" And for once, the tone didn't feel defensive. It felt sincere. But Ms. Avery knew better than to think the work was done. Because the truth is, moments like that haircut, those don't just vanish. They leave a mark, not always visible, but present. Sometimes in the form of hyper-awareness. Other times in the little second guesses that follow you around. Should I wear my hair like this? Will they take me seriously if I speak up? Am I too much? Not enough? She had asked herself those questions more than once. Long before this school. Long before this job. That's why, on the following Friday, she did something deliberate. She walked into school with her braids freshly redone. Long, bold, decorated with gold cuffs. Not toned down. Not subtle. And she wore a shirt with a single word printed across the chest. Unapologetic. Some noticed immediately. Some blinked. Some smiled. And the boy, yes, that boy, he looked up from his desk and nodded once. A slow, small nod of understanding. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. That day, Ms. Avery changed the lesson plan again. She asked each student to create a short presentation on what makes me me. No grades. No slides required. Just stories. And honesty. One by one, the students stood up. Some spoke about their families. One talked about growing up with 5 siblings and always being the quiet one. Another confessed he used to pretend to hate school just to fit in. A girl shared how she felt invisible at home, and that's why she acted out at school, because at least someone noticed. And then, unexpectedly, the boy who had cut her braids stood up. He didn't bring notes, didn't hold a paper, just walked to the front, hands at his sides. I used to think being tough meant acting like nothing mattered, he said. But it's not true. I was scared of looking weak, so I did things that made me look small. He turned to Ms. Avery. I can't undo what I did, but I can choose what kind of person I want to be now. Then he sat back down. No applause. No big moment. Just silence. The kind that comes after truth. Ms. Avery didn't add anything to his words. She just looked at the rest of the class and said, "When someone shows growth, honor it. It costs nothing to give someone the chance to be better." The final presentations that day were raw, beautiful, honest in a way most school assignments never were. And when the bell rang, no one rushed to leave. They packed up slowly, quietly, like something sacred had just happened. One student lingered behind. "Ms. Avery," she said, "do you think we'll forget all this in a few weeks?" Ms. Avery smiled. "That depends. Do you plan to?"